Picture a wooden box 70 feet long, packed with 160 men. Now fill it with barrels of meat that was salted down 2 years ago, biscuit so hard it has to be broken with a fist or a boot heel, beer that has gone sour and thick and grows a skin on top if you leave your mug standing too long, and cheese that sweats in the heat and moves, very slightly if you watch it carefully, because it is full of living things. Add rats. Add the smell of 160 men who have not washed in 3 months. Add the sea, which wants to kill all of you patiently every single day. That's an English warship in the reign of Henry VIII. One of the most advanced machines human beings had ever built, and a floating famine at the same time. A place where the food in the hold could kill you faster than the French guns, and everyone on board knew it, and everyone ate anyway, because the only thing worse than eating it was not eating it. We're going back there tonight, not as historians counting barrels in a ledger. We're living it. One voyage, one man, everything he would have chewed, swallowed, gagged on and somehow survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all lying in the dark listening to descriptions of maggots in ship's biscuit, for reasons you'd rather not explain to your families. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The biscuit in your hand has something moving inside it. You can feel it before you can see it, because it is night, and the gun deck is dark except for one horn lantern swinging from a beam 10 feet away, and the biscuit is pressed against your palm, and something inside it is shifting its weight. A faint, dry, papery movement, like a finger tapping very softly from the inside. You're 22 years old, your name is Thomas Wick, and this is your supper. You have 2 choices, and you learned them both in your first week at sea 7 weeks ago. You can eat the biscuit in daylight, where you can see the weevils and pick them out one by one, which takes time and turns your stomach and never gets all of the men away. Or you can eat it in the dark, the way the old sailors do, where you can't see anything, and what you don't see doesn't count. You eat in the dark now. Everyone does, after the first month. You bring the biscuit up and knock it twice against the barrel of the demi-culverin beside you, hard, the way old Aldous taught you. Knock the biscuit, wait, knock again. The weevils feel the shock and come out to see what's happening, and they drop, and you hear them, tiny soft ticks against the deck planking like the first spits of rain. 2 of them, maybe 3. Then you bite down before any more can think about it. The biscuit does not break. Your teeth slide off it. It is like biting a roof tile, so you do what you do every night. You hold the edge of it in the corner of your mouth where your back teeth are, and you clamp down and rock it, grinding, working a corner loose the way a dog works a bone, and you feel the pressure travel up through your jaw into your ear, a deep aching creak. And finally a piece the size of a thumbnail snaps off with a crack you feel in your skull, and you hold it on your tongue and wait. You wait because it has to soften. Ship's biscuit fresh from the barrel is baked hard enough to stop a knife. You hold the fragment in your spit and count slowly, the way Aldous taught you, 1 to 50, and while you count, the biscuit turns from stone into something like wet sawdust, and a taste spreads across your tongue that you have stopped noticing mostly, which is the taste of flour and salt and dust and age, and very faintly, underneath it all, something musty and animal, which you know now is the weevils, the ones you didn't knock out, dissolving along with everything else. 7 weeks ago you would have gagged. Tonight you swallow and reach for your beer and think about nothing at all. Welcome aboard the Mary Grace, a warship of King Henry VIII of England, 400 tons somewhere in the grey water between Portsmouth and the coast of Brittany in the spring of the year 1545. And here is the thing you need to understand before anything else, the thing that shapes every hour of your life on this ship. The French fleet is out there. The biggest invasion fleet anyone has seen in living memory. More than 200 ships, 30,000 men, and it is coming for England this summer. Everyone knows it. The king knows it, which is why you are here. Your ship is part of the screen of vessels feeling around the channel for the enemy. And any morning could be the morning the lookout screams and the drums beat and men start dying. But the French are not what will probably kill you. What will probably kill you is in the hold, directly below where you are sitting, rows and rows of barrels, hundreds of them, packed in the dark on top of the stinking gravel ballast, and inside those barrels is your food. And the food is losing a slow war against time, salt, damp, and rot. And every week it loses a little more, and every week you have to eat it anyway. On this ship, more men will die of the food, and the water, and the sicknesses that ride in on both than will ever die of a French cannonball. That is not a guess. That is simply how it goes. Every voyage, every year, and every man aboard knows it, and no one talks about it. The same way no one talks about drowning. You swallow your biscuit. You knock loose another piece. The lantern swings. The ship groans around you, a long wooden groan that travels from the keel up through the frames, through the deck, into your spine. Somewhere below you in the dark, the barrels shift against their lashings and settle, and something in the bilge makes a soft, thick, wet sound that you have learned not to think about. Let me take you back briefly to how you got here, because you did not plan for this. Nobody plans for this. 7 weeks ago you were standing on the cobbles of Portsmouth Point with a canvas bag on your shoulder, containing one spare shirt, a knife with a handle you carved yourself, a wooden spoon, and a lump of your mother's cheese wrapped in a rag. You're the third son of a tenant farmer near Titchfield, which means you inherit nothing, which means you are going to be somebody's labourer for the rest of your life. And then the king's officers came through Hampshire pressing men for the fleet, and a man with a paper and a chain of office looked at your shoulders and your hands and said, "That one." That was the whole conversation. That one. They gave you a shilling, which is called pressed money, which is where the word pressed comes from, and they wrote a version of your name in a book spelled wrong, and from that moment you belong to the Mary Grace. 6 shillings and 8 pence a month, they said. Food included. Food included. You want to laugh now, thinking about it, but you didn't know then. Standing on the dock, staring up at the ship, at the castles rising fore and aft, at the masts going up and up until your neck hurt, at the gun ports in a long row like teeth, you thought it was the grandest thing you had ever seen. And it is. That's the trick of it. It is genuinely one of the most magnificent objects in the kingdom, and the inside of it will try to kill you with dinner. Your mother's cheese lasted 4 days. You made it last 4 days, cutting slivers with your knife, eating them slowly at night in your hammock space, holding each sliver against the roof of your mouth. Real cheese. Cheese from a named cow, from a green field you could walk to, made by hands you knew. When it was gone, you kept the rag it was wrapped in, because it still smelled faintly of it, and for another week you would sometimes press the rag to your face in the dark. And then one night the rag only smelled of the ship, and that was that. The land was gone. Now the smell of the ship is the only smell there is. I need to describe this smell properly, because it is the medium you live inside, the way a fish lives inside water, And if you don't understand the smell, you don't understand anything. Start at the bottom, the bilge. Down at the very lowest point of the hull, below the hold, seawater seeps in through the seams, as it does on every wooden ship ever built, and it pools in the dark among the gravel ballast, and everything drains into it. Spilled beer, brine leak from meat casks, the filth of 160 men, because although you are supposed to climb to the heads at the bow and hang out over the open sea to relieve yourself, in bad weather, in darkness, in sickness, men use the dark corners of the lower decks, and it all works down through the planking deck by deck into the bilge, where it mixes with the dead water and the rotting gravel, and it ferments. Bilge stink is not like anything on land. It is sweet and foul at the same time, a thick, clinging, greenish smell, the smell of an egg gone bad inside a dead animal inside a pond, when the men at the pumps bring the bilge water up, gushing along the channels and out the side of the ship. The whole vessel gags. Even the old men, the 20-year men with faces like salted leather, breathe through their mouths when the pumps are working. On top of the bilge, layer by layer, the other smells stack up. Tar, everywhere, in the ropes, in the seams, on your own hands, a black resinous throat-catching smell that you will associate with the sea for the rest of your life. Wet wood and wet wool, which have two different kinds of dampness, and you can tell them apart now. The animal reek of the manger up forward where they keep the live pigs, and the sharper stink of the chicken coops lashed on deck. Smoke and grease from the cookroom, the sour breath of 160 mouths full of rotting teeth, old sweat baked into every garment because nobody has a change of clothes worth speaking of, and nobody washes, because fresh water is for drinking and cooking and absolutely nothing else. And under everything, over everything, through everything, salt. Salt in the air, salt crusted on the ropes, salt stiffening your clothes so that your jacket can nearly stand up on its own, salt in the cracks of your knuckles where it burns, salt in every single thing you will eat for the next however many months, salt until your tongue no longer remembers what its absence tastes like. That is your world. 70 feet long, 30 feet wide, and it smells like that. All day, all night. And after 7 weeks, the honest truth is you barely notice, except on pump days, and except when you catch, once in a great while, a thread of land smell blown out from some invisible coast, grass or wood smoke or rain on soil, and something in your chest actually hurts. Now, the food. Let me walk you through a day of eating on this ship, because the day is built around it, and your body's built around it, and by the end of the voyage your body will have been rebuilt by it, and not in a good way. You wake before dawn to a boatswain's mate roaring down the hatchway and the thud of his rope's end against the beams, and the first thing you are aware of, before your eyes even open, is your mouth. It is dry, and it tastes of salt and old beer and something faintly rotten that is probably your own gums, and your tongue feels too big. This is how every morning begins. Thirst is the constant. Not hunger, though hunger is there too, a low, permanent grinding presence just behind your navel. Thirst is worse, because the cure for thirst on this ship is beer, and the beer is dying. Every English sailor gets a gallon of beer a day. That is the ration, set down on paper, 1 gallon per man per day. And when landsmen hear that, they whistle and say a sailor's life must be a merry one. A gallon of beer, 8 pints. Here is what they don't understand. The beer is not for merriment. The beer is the water. You cannot store plain water in wooden casks for more than a couple of weeks before it turns green and thick and foul, growing slime on top, tasting of the swamp it has become. But beer, weak beer, ship's beer, brewed cheap and fast in the great brewhouses the king has built at Portsmouth for exactly this purpose. Beer keeps a little longer because it has been boiled in the making and the hops slow the rot. So you drink beer at dawn, beer with dinner, beer with supper, beer when you're hauling, beer when you're sick. 8 pints a day of weak, flat, sour beer is not a party. It is plumbing. It is the only liquid keeping 160 working bodies alive. And it is going off. Week by week you can taste it going. The first week out of Portsmouth the beer was almost good, thin but clean with a bready sweetness. By the 3rd week it had gone sharp at the edges. Now, in the 7th week, when the cooper broaches a new cask, you all watch his face, because some casks come up merely sour, and you drink those, and some casks come up wrong, thick and ropey, pouring like thin oil, with a smell like wet dog, and you drink those too if the master says so, because the arithmetic of the sea is very simple. Bad beer today or no beer at all next week. You have seen men hold their noses and pour it down. You've done it yourself. You will do it this morning. At dawn you get your breakfast, which is not really a meal, just a fist of biscuit and a first pot of beer, taken standing wherever your work is. And then the ship's day takes you. And I want you to feel this part in your hands, because your hands are where the day happens. Your watch this morning is at the pumps, and then hauling on the main course sheets when the wind shifts, and the ropes of a king's ship are not the ropes you knew on the farm. They are thick as your wrist, hairy hemp stiffened with salt and tar, and when you haul the fibres bite into your palms in a particular way, a hot, prickling grip, and you can feel every strand. Your palms, 7 weeks in, have gone through their whole story already. First the blisters, fat and watery in the first days, then the blisters tearing open on the ropes and the raw pink shine underneath, and the way you had to keep hauling anyway, breath hissing through your teeth, then the crusting, the hardening, and now you have a young sailor's hands, yellow padded, cracked at the creases, with black tar worked so deep into the lines of your palms that no amount of anything will ever get it out. Your hands hurt in the morning. All hands on this ship hurt in the morning. Men wake and flex their fingers slowly, one at a time, wincing, working the stiffness out, like old men, and half of them are younger than 25. You pump. The pump handle is smooth ash, polished by 10,000 hours of palms, and it moves with a resistance that you have to throw your whole back into, down and up, and each stroke ends with a gurgling rush somewhere below, and the stink rising up the pump well like a living thing. You pump in shifts of 100 strokes. By stroke 40 your shoulders are burning. By stroke 70 the burn has spread down your spine into the backs of your legs, and your breath is loud in your own head, and your cracked palms are screaming on the ash, and you fix your eyes on the grain of the deck planking in front of you, on one particular black seam of caulking, and you count. Every ship leaks. This is normal. This is just a sea coming in slowly, all the time, forever, and men like you pushing it back out all the time, forever. By mid-morning your stomach has folded in on itself and is chewing at nothing, and this is when the smell starts, the smell from the cookroom. Deep in the ship, forward and low, there is a fire hearth, a great box of brick set right down in the hold on the ballast, because an open fire on a wooden ship is such a monstrous idea that they put it as low as possible, where a spilled coal has the least catch. In that brick box burns the only fire on board, and over the fire hangs a copper cauldron big enough to boil a man, and into that cauldron this morning the cook's crew have dropped today's meat. Today is a flesh day. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, flesh days, salt beef or salt pork. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, fish days, salt cod or stockfish, with cheese and butter. That rhythm is set partly by old church habit and mostly by the Crown's purse, and your body knows the week by it better than any calendar. And the smell of boiling salt beef crawling aft along the decks, finding you at your work, is a complicated cruelty, because it is a good smell and a bad smell braided together, meat and broth and warmth on top, and underneath, unmistakably the sour, tallowy, slightly sulphurous note of meat that was packed into brine barrels a very, very long time ago. You're so hungry that the good half of the smell wins, and your mouth floods, and your stomach twists up toward it like a plant toward light. Dinner is the great meal, served around midday, and it works like this. The crew is divided into messes, little families of 6 men who eat together, every meal, the whole voyage. Your mess is your world. You have 5 brothers now, assigned by chance, welded by repetition. There is old Aldous, who is perhaps 50 and looks 70, who has been at sea since the old king's day, whose gums are grey and whose remaining teeth are brown pegs, and who knows everything about how to stay alive on a ship. There is Davy, 16, from Gosport, all elbows and ears, who cries at night sometimes and thinks nobody hears. There is Walter the gunner's mate, thick as a cask, quiet, who eats with terrifying focus, hunched over his food like a man guarding it from wolves. There is Crooked John, who had his shoulder pulled apart by a falling yard years ago and mended wrong, and who can still haul with the best of them but sleeps in one position only. And there is Perkin, who talks. Perkin talks the way the bilge stinks, constantly and about everything, and you have learned to let it wash over you. At the drum, 1 man from each mess goes forward to the cookroom with the mess kid, a shallow wooden tub, and today it is your turn, and this is a thing worth seeing, so look at it. The cookroom glows. In the whole dark, dripping body of the ship, this one low space is orange with firelight, and the heat hits your face like an opened oven door, and the air is thick enough to chew, with steam and smoke and the fatty fog of boiled salt beef. The cook is a one-legged man named Gilbert, because ship's cooks are so often maimed men, sailors too broken for the rigging given the one job you can do standing still, and Gilbert stands wedged against the roll of the ship, in a horseshoe of brick shining with sweat and grease, hauling lumps of grey meat out of the seething copper with an iron flesh hook longer than your arm. The pieces come up steaming, trailing broth, and they do not look like meat as you knew meat on land. They are grey through and through, grey as the sea in November, dense, fibrous, shrunken hard against the bone where there is bone. 2-pound pieces, cut and salted down by the victuallers in Portsmouth. God knows when, months ago, maybe years ago, packed in salt in oak casks, and in the cask the salt does its work, and its work is this. It drags the water out of the flesh, and with the water goes everything soft, everything that makes meat meat, and what is left is a kind of leather. Salt-hardened, brine-cured ship's beef. And the older it is, the harder it gets, and some of the pieces in the oldest casks are so dense, so wood-like, that sailors carve them. I mean that literally. Aldous has a little box he keeps his fish hooks in, whittled from a piece of ship's beef, sanded smooth, and it has lasted him 4 years, and it will not rot, because nothing that can rot is left in it. Gilbert drops 6 pieces into your kid, 1 per man, and ladles broth over them, and the broth is the colour of dishwater with beads of yellow fat riding on it. And he looks at you with his boiled red face and says what he says to every man, "Mind the kid, tide's lively," which means don't spill it, the ship is rolling. 'Cause if you spill the mess's dinner, there is no more dinner. There is no more. That is the whole law of the sea in 3 words. You carry the kid aft with the concentration of a man carrying his own beating heart. The ship rolls, long and slow, and you time your steps to it. Knees soft, elbows in, the hot tub steaming against your chest, broth tilting to the rim on the roll and back, and the smell coming straight up into your face so dense and animal that your empty stomach actually cramps hard, and you have to stop, wedged against a stanchion, and wait for it to pass. Your mess eats between 2 guns, sitting on the deck and on shot boxes, the kid in the middle. Every man has his own spoon and his own knife, and every man marks his own piece, and there is a ritual to it, unspoken, iron hard. Aldous portions the biscuit. Walter, for reasons no one remembers, divides the cheese on cheese days. The broth is passed in order of age. Davy, being youngest, drinks last and gets the bottom of it, where the salt settles, and does not complain, because last year, before you came aboard, there was apparently a boy who complained. You take your piece of beef in your hand. It is too hot, and you hold it anyway, tossing it palm to palm because hot is a luxury and you're not wasting 1 second of hot. And then you eat, and eating salt beef is work, actual work. That goes like this. You cut a corner off with your knife, and the blade goes through it the way it would go through a boot sole, with a sawing pressure. You put the corner in your mouth and you chew, and chew. The meat does not dissolve. It does not soften into pulp the way meat does. It fights you, springy, dense, fibrous, and your jaw works and works. And the taste that comes out of it is salt first, blinding salt, enough salt to make your lips sting where they are cracked, and then under the salt is deep, old, tallowy beefiness. Not bad exactly, but tired, like the ghost of a roast dinner heard about from someone who was there. You chew each piece 30, 40 times, and then you swallow a wad of it, still fibrous, and feel it go down with a distinct pressure all the way, and then you cut the next corner. 160 jaws all working at once up and down the gun deck. That is the sound of dinner on a king's ship. Not talk, not at first. Just the wet, rhythmic, muscular sound of men grinding away at preserved flesh, and the click of knives, and the scrape of spoons on the kid, and the ship creaking, and the sea going past the hull an inch of oak away from your back. And here is the thing you could never have understood on land. It is the best part of the day. It is genuinely, honestly, the best part of the day. The heat of the food, the fullness after, the company of your mess, Perkin talking, Aldous grunting, the beer going round. Your body doesn't care what the mind knows about the barrels below. Your body says warm, salt, fat, full, and floods you with something dangerously close to happiness, and for half an hour, wedged between a demi-culverin and Walter's enormous shoulder, licking grease off your cracked fingers, you are as content as you have ever been in your life. That is the trap of it. That is how they keep 160 men working a wet wooden machine toward a battle. Not the 6 shillings and 8 pence, the dinner. Then the drum beats again, and the kid is scraped, and the afternoon takes you back. Let me tell you about the biscuit properly now, because biscuit is the true foundation of your existence. The ground you stand on, a pound of it a day, every day, flesh day, or fish day, storm or calm, and it deserves its due. It is made ashore in the king's bakehouses, and the word for it says everything. Biscoctus, twice cooked. Baked, and then bake again, dried down until almost no water is left in it at all, because water is what rot needs, and a biscuit baked hard enough is beyond rot's reach, almost beyond time's reach. Flat, round, greyish-brown cakes, each one about the width of your spread hand, each one weighing heavy for its size, dense as a floor tile. Fresh from the ovens, men say, it is almost pleasant, warm and wheaty. You have never had it fresh from the ovens. You have it months old, from casks and sacks in the hold, and months old it is a mineral. You cannot bite it. I want to be clear about this, because people imagine hard bread and they think of a stale crust. No. A seasoned ship's biscuit cannot be bitten by a young man with good teeth, and there are not many good teeth on this ship. You break it. You smash it on a gun barrel, or crack it under a knife handle, or put it in a canvas rag and hit it with a belaying pin, and it doesn't crumble so much as fracture into sharp-edged shards like pottery. And then you have your choices, and every man has his method, and the methods are identities. Aldous dunks. He drops his shards into his beer pot and lets them stand while he eats his meat, and by the end his beer is a pale porridge, and he drinks and eats it at once. And he does this, he says, because of his gums, and he has done it for 30 years. Walter grinds. He has a back tooth left on each side, and he feeds shards in and mills them slowly, endlessly, all through the meal like an ox. Davy sucks, holding a shard in his cheek until it slumps. Perkins soaks his in broth and mashes it into the fat, which is honestly the best way, and on good days you do the same, and the result, biscuit pulp and beef fat and broth hot, is called by the men on this ship, with no irony at all, good eating. And the weevils. Let us be honest about the weevils in the dark between us. The biscuit lives in the hold for months and things move into it. Weevils, little dark beetles smaller than a barley grain, that drill and breed inside so that a biscuit held to your ear on a quiet night, and I have told you this, and it is true, can be heard, a faint interior rustling, and the maggots, these soft white ones, which are worse to see but which the old men mind less. Aldous says, and he says it while eating, calmly, that the maggots are the biscuit anyway, since they're made of nothing else. So what are you eating but biscuit? He says the weevil is bitter, but the maggot is cold and mealy, and he prefers, given a choice, and here Davy usually gets up and leaves the maggot. You knock them out when you can. You eat in the dark when you can't. And 7 weeks in, here is the truth that would have horrified the Thomas of the Spring. It has stopped mattering. Your disgust was a landsman's luxury, and you spent it in the first fortnight, all of it, and now it is gone, and biscuit is biscuit, and protein is protein, and the sea does not care, and neither any more do you. The afternoon is gun drill. The master gunner walks the deck while you and Walter and 4 others fight your demi-culverin, 9 feet of cast bronze, 1.5 tons of it, run it in, sponge, load with a dummy charge, ram, run it out, and running out a culverin is 6 men throwing themselves against the tackles, bare feet scrabbling on damp planking, the trucks rumbling like thunder as 2,000 pounds of gun rolls to the port, and the rope shivers and bites your ruined palms, and Walter beside you breathes in short, hard grunts, and the gunner counts, too slow again, because somewhere over the horizon are 200 French ships, and when they come, Slow gun crews die first. By the end of drill, your arms are trembling, actually trembling. A fine shiver in the muscle that you can watch in your own forearm. And the salt sweat is stinging in the cracks of your hands, and your lower back has a hot wire through it. And this is a normal afternoon. This is not even a hard day. And your body, listen to it. Your body is running all of this. The hauling, the pumping, the drill, the climbing. 14 hours of heavy labour on salt leather, stone bread, sour beer, and old cheese. That arithmetic has an answer, and the answer is coming, and it is called scurvy, but you don't know that word yet. Nobody on this ship knows why it happens. They only know that it happens on the long voyages, in the later months, the rot from inside. We will get there. The voyage will take us there, but not yet. Because first, tonight, something is going to happen to the water. It is the middle watch, the dead hours after midnight, and you are on deck because it is your watch to be on deck, huddled in the lee of the mainmast with your arms crossed into your armpits, and the night is moonless and the sea is a long black breathing, when the cooper comes up the after hatch with a lantern and a face like a funeral. The cooper is the man who keeps the casks, and on a ship the man who keeps the casks keeps the life of everyone aboard. And his face at 2 a.m. is a message all by itself. He goes after the master, and there is quiet talk, and then the master goes below with him, and Aldous beside you, who misses nothing ever, says one word. Beer. By morning the whole ship knows. Water has got into the hold in the last blow, or the blow shifted the tiers and started seams in the casks, or the casks were green wood and bad coopering from the start, and it hardly matters which, because the result is the same. Whole tiers of beer casks are spoiled, broached and tasted and spat out even by Gilbert, who has the deadest tongue on the ship, not sour, spoiled, foul, undrinkable even by the arithmetic of the sea. And the ship goes quiet in a way you've not felt before, quiet along its whole length, because every man aboard is doing the same sum in his head. 1 gallon a day, 160 men, and the master and the purser down there in the lantern, like counting what is left, cask by cask, sounding them with a mallet, ear to the oak, and the number they come up with is not shared with you, because numbers like that never are. But the order that comes up with the morning is share enough. The ration is cut. Half allowance of beer, effective now. And the word goes down the decks like cold water down your back. Half allowance. 4 pints for a day of labour that wrings more than that out of your body in sweat. You feel the difference by the second day, and it is not where you expected. You expected a dry mouth, and yes, your mouth is dry, your tongue clings to your teeth and your spit goes thick and ropey. But the real difference is in your head. A dull, tight band behind the eyes. All day, a slowness. You go to coil a line and find yourself standing, stopped, the line in your hands, not knowing how long you've stood. Men snap at each other over nothing, over an elbow, over a look. Davy gets a clout on the ear from a boatswain's mate for fumbling a knot he has tied perfectly 1,000 times, and you understand, watching, that the whole crew is now a machine running low, and the master knows it too, which is why, on the 3rd day, the ship's head comes round, and the word is passed that you are running in toward the coast to water, watering. On land you turned a tap or dropped a bucket down the well behind the house. 30 seconds done, thought about nothing. Now watch what that same act costs at sea. The ship cannot go to the water because the water is a stream at the head of a shallow bay on a hostile coast. So the water must come to the ship cask by cask in boats over a mile of open sea. and every cask is oak and iron, and holds a hogshead or more, and full it weighs as much as 3 men, and there are dozens to fill. You go in the longboat with the second trip. You pull an oar for a mile with your cracked hands, in a boat crowded with empty casks that boom hollowly against each other on every wave, and the sound is like being inside a drum. You wade the last stretch, sea to mid-thigh, cold enough to punch your breath out, boots grinding on stones you can't see, hauling the boat up. And then, for 6 hours, you do the heaviest work you have ever done in a life made entirely of heavy work. The stream comes down through a fold of bracken and stunted oaks, and the water is brown gold over the stones, peaty cold. And the first thing every man does, with the officer pretending not to see, is drop face down on the bank and drink. Drink like animals, like the boat's crew of the Ark. The water is so cold it aches in your teeth, and it tastes of earth and iron and leaves. It tastes of land. It tastes the way the word green would taste, and you feel it go down your throat and spread through your chest like light. And for one moment your whole body sings a single note of pure animal gratitude, and you understand, face down in the bracken with your lips numb, that you have never once in your life before this moment actually tasted water. Then you stand up and you work. The casks are floated ashore, rolled up the stones, man-handled along the bank. Filling is done with leather buckets and a wooden funnel. Bucket brigade from the pool to the cask, swing and pass, and the full buckets pull your arms down like anchors, and the water slops down your front so that within the hour you are soaked and shivering even as you sweat. A full cask has to be bunged, then rolled back down to the water over rough stone, and a rolling hogshead is a live thing. It wants to run, it wants to crush feet and pin men against rocks, and you learn the trade of it in an hour of shouted instruction. Brace it on your thighs, never your hands flat on the ground, walk it, check it, ease it. Then it is floated out to the boat and hauled up over the gunwale with a perbuckle rig. All hands on the falls. 1, 2, heave. The boat rocking murderously and lashed, and when the boat is loaded to an inch of freeboard you row it, a mile, back to the ship, where a yard-arm tackle plucks each cask up the towering side, and men in the hold stow it down in the dark, and then the boat goes back for more. All day, boat after boat. Your palms crack open again, and the peat water gets into the cracks and stings like vinegar. Your shoulders go past pain into a kind of ringing numbness. A man from the other watch puts his foot wrong under a rolling cask and is carried back to the boats, with his ankle already swelling over his shoe like rising dough, and the work does not stop while he is carried. It does not even slow. And all day, every hour, the officer on the beach looks up from the work to the headland, and the lookout posted on the headland looks inland, because this is a hostile coast in a war summer, and a watering party is the softest target on the ocean, scattered, burdened, half of them up a stream, their weapons in a pile by the boats. If horsemen come over that hill, some of the men filling buckets beside you will not go home, and everyone knows it, and nobody says it, and the buckets swing and swing and swing. By evening the ship has her water, tons of it, weeks of it, bought with 1 broken ankle and 300 hands flayed raw. And here is the bitter joke that Aldous delivers that night, in the dark, with his supper biscuit knocking against the gun. All that, he says, all that day of blood and sweat, and in 3 weeks the water in those casks will be green and stinking and growing hair, and they'll be pouring beer dregs into it to kill the taste, and men will hold their noses to drink it, and it will still be the most precious thing on the ship. He is right, of course. He is always right. That is the most frightening thing about Aldous. The days after the watering fall into the long middle of the voyage, and the long middle of the voyage is where the sea does its real work on men, which is not drama. It is repetition. Let me give you the shape of it, the way it lives in your body now. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, around the clock. The watch is turning like a slow wheel, so that you never once, in months, sleep more than 3.5 hours together, and the tiredness stops being tiredness and becomes the water you swim in. Your hammock space is 14 inches wide. 14. Between Perkin and a man from Devon who fights battles in his sleep, and you sleep in the swinging dark of the gun deck with 100 other breathing, coughing, muttering men in air so thick and used that the lantern flames burn small, and you sleep anyway instantly, like a dropped stone, because your body takes what it can get. And the food turns its slow wheel too. Flesh day, fish day, flesh day, fish day. And I have told you about the flesh days, so let me give you a fish day, because fish days have their own particular character, and their character is labour. The fish is stockfish, mostly. Cod. Caught off Iceland or Newfoundland by men whose lives are somehow harder than yours, split and dried in the wind on wooden racks until it is a board. I mean it is a board. A whole dried cod is a flat grey-yellow triangular plank hard as oak that clatters when the pieces are counted out, and the smell of it is dense and ancient. A concentrated low-tide smell that lives in the fish room and rolls out when the hatch is lifted like something escaping. You cannot cook it as it is. It must be beaten. There is a scarred oak block by the cookroom for exactly this, and a wooden mallet, and on the eve of a fish day one of the cook's crew, or some soul being punished, stands at that block and beats the fish. Whack, 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 breaking the fibres, softening the board into something that water can enter, and that sound, the flat wooden smack of stockfish being murdered, echoing down the decks, is as much a part of the ship's music as the bell. Then it is steeped in sea water and fresh in turns and boiled, and it comes out of the copper in ragged grey-white sheets, and it tastes honestly of almost nothing. Of salt, of course. Everything is of salt, and of a faint fishy shadow, and mostly of the texture, which is like eating wet rope that gives up and lets you. But on fish days there is butter, and there is cheese, and this is where I need you to sit with something, because the cheese is the thing you would least survive. You, the modern man, if you were dropped into Thomas's body tonight. The butter comes up from the hold in small casks, and it went into those casks salted months ago, and what comes out is not what a dairy would recognise. It is deep yellow going to orange at the edges, and it has gone past soft. It is oily, it slumps, and the smell of it is high and sharp, cheesy itself, with a rancid top note like wet nuts, and you spread it on your broken biscuit with your knife, thick, and you eat it, and you are glad of it, because it is fat, and your body screams for fat all day long the way it screams for nothing else. The old men say the Flemish butter keeps best, and the ship has whatever the victuallers were paid to send, and when a cask comes up truly turned, rancid to the bone, it is not thrown away. Nothing is ever thrown away. Turned butter is given to the boatswain's stores to grease running rigging and pay leather, and there are days when you cannot say hauling a sheet whether the smell on your hands is the rope's breakfast or your own. And the cheese came aboard in great hard wheels, Suffolk cheese, which even landsmen make jokes about. Suffolk cheese so hard, they say, that pigs turn it down, that you could shoe a horse with it, that a wheel of it dropped from the yardarm would stove a boat. In the hold, through the warm weeks, the wheels sweat. They weep fat, they crack, and things get in, and a cut wheel on the mess deck is a landscape. The outer rim like rind of wood, a marbled interior going from waxy to crumbling, veins of blue and green mould running through it like ore, and here and there, in the worst wheels, movement. Mites, a fine cinnamon-coloured dust that is alive, drifting in the cut, and in the truly far-gone wheels, hoppers, the little pale maggots that jump, you eat it. You cut away what even the sea's arithmetic won't allow, and the rest you eat, mould and mites and all, pressed onto biscuit with your thumb, and Aldous says the mould is nothing. The mould is the cheese dreaming, and Walter eats the blue veins first, on purpose, says they taste strongest, and he is right, they do. They taste sharp and rotten and rich all at once. A taste with a cellar in it, and your body, mad for anything that is not salt leather and stone bread, has decided weeks ago without consulting you that this cheese is delicious. That is the sentence I need you to carry out of this part of the night. The body decides without consulting you. Every sailor on this ship is a mind riding a body that has quietly renegotiated all its treaties. Disgust has been demoted, hunger has been promoted, and the great slow diseases of the deep-sea diet are gathering in the dark of everyone's blood, patient as the barrels, and no one aboard can see them coming, because no one aboard knows what food is actually for. They know food fills. They do not know food builds. The knowledge that a lemon could save a man's life is decades away, centuries away from being truly understood, and so this whole magnificent ship sails on through the spring of 1545, with death stowed neatly below in oak, drawn off daily by the purser, portioned fairly, mess by mess, and eaten with gratitude. You are grateful. That is the strangest part looking back. You were grateful. Now let me tell you about the pig. There are live animals on this ship, and if that surprises you, hold the thought, because a Tudor warship is partly a farm. Up forward, in a manger of planks and straw, live 4 pigs. Or there were 4, there are 2 now, and a pen of hens travels lashed on the deck above, complaining about the sea in a continuous low mutter. And the reason they are aboard is simple. They are the only fresh meat that exists in your world, and they are not for you. They are for the sick, mostly, broth for men in fever, and for the captain's table, and their smell, hot straw and dung and warm animal, is, in the general reek of the ship, almost pleasant. It smells like home. Men who have no reason to go forward find reasons to go forward, and stand by the manger a moment, and some of them talk to the pigs, quietly, the way you would talk to a horse, and nobody mocks them for it. Davy loves the pigs. Davy, 16, who cries at night, has adopted the smaller of the 2 remaining, a black and pink sow he calls Mercy, and he saves her, and I have watched him do it, shreds of his own stockfish which he cannot spare. The old men let it happen. Even Aldous lets it happen and says nothing. And I understood, watching Aldous say nothing, that Aldous had a pig once too on some ship in some other reign. The rats, on the other hand, love the hold. You hear them at night. Everyone does. Under the sounds of the ship working, the creak and groan and rush. There is small civilization down there, in the dark among the barrels, scratching, scuttling the tiny gnaw of teeth that never stop growing meeting oak, that never stops being in the way. They eat the biscuit through the cask staves. they eat the cheese, they eat the candles, they eat leather, they eat, given the chance, the corns of your toes while you sleep, which is a thing that happens that men wake to, and the ship fights its endless war against them. And once in the middle passage of the voyage, the boys and the idlers are sent down with lanterns and clubs and a terrier that belongs to the carpenter, and there is a ratting day, deep in the hold, killing among the barrels for hours, and the count comes up over 300. And Aldous, watching the little corpses go over the side in baskets, says only, "For everyone you see." And here is a thing that Perkin tells you, and Perkin talks so much that you have learned to sieve him. But this one comes with a look that means it is true. On some ships, he says, on the long voyages, when the beef is finished and the fish is finished, and the biscuit crumbs are being swept up and shared with a spoon, the rats stop being enemies. They become game, fresh meat, running around free, and men hunt them, and a plump grain-fed hold rat, skinned and boiled, sells, sailor to sailor, on the worst voyages for money, good money. Good. Men have paid a day's wages for a rat. You laugh when he says it. You will not be laughing in the last week of this voyage. Hold that too, because the voyage is turning now. You feel it turn the way you feel the season change, not in any one day, but in the run of them. The Mary Grace has been at sea for 3 months working the channel approaches, and 3 months is where the arithmetic of the barrel starts arriving at its answers, one after another, like bells. The beer is nearly done. What is left is the dregs of the worst casks, and the water taken on at the stream is now, as prophesied, a horror. When the scuttled butt on deck is refilled, the water comes up from the casks with a smell you can find across the deck. A green, eggy, standing pond smell, with soft threads of slime that swirl in the dipper, and men have developed a common technique, all down the ship without anyone teaching it. You clamp your nose shut with your left thumb and finger, you drink the dipper down in one long throatful with your right, and you walk away quickly, mouth open to the wind. Done that way, it stays down. Sipped, it does not. The biscuit is down to the broken stores, the sweepings, casks where damp got in. And damp biscuit is worse than hard biscuit, because damp biscuit moulds, and the mould on biscuit is bitter and dusty and stings the back of the throat. The cheese is finished except for 2 wheels so far gone that even this crew votes with its stomach, and the purser has them minuted in his book as serviceable, because the purser's book is a work of fiction in which everything is serviceable, and there will be an argument about these wheels between the purser and the master that the whole ship pretends not to hear, conducted in furious murmurs by the whipstaff, and the master will win, and the wheels will go over the side at night, and the purser will watch them go like a man watching money drown, because to him it is exactly that. And the men are changing. This is the part I most need you to feel, because this is the part the ledgers never wrote down. 3 months of this diet, and the crew is still working, still hauling, still drilling on the guns, but everything has slowed by some fraction that you can see if you knew them in April. Faces have gone grey and settled close on the bone. Gums have gone soft. You notice it first as a mess deck sound, men working their biscuit more carefully, wincing in a new way, and Aldous, who has seen everything, has started quietly to inspect mouths. He does it like a horse trader. Thumb on your chin, tilt to the lantern, and when he looks at your gums, his face does not change at all, which is how you know it is a serious matter. And when he looks at Crooked John's gums, his face still does not change. But that night he sits differently, and does not tell his story, and the mess is quiet around the absence of it. Because Crooked John's gums have gone the colour of raw liver, and risen puffy over the roots of his teeth, and his breath has taken on a sweetish, deathly edge that you can smell when he passes the beer pot and the bruises. That is the thing. John bruises now if you look at him. His forearms are mapped in browns and purples and yellows, stains that bloom from nothing and do not heal, and the old scar on his ruined shoulder, the scar that healed white and silent 15 years ago, has begun. And I want you to sit very still and hear this, because it is one of the most quietly horrifying facts I know about the human body. His old scar has begun to open. The rot from inside unstitches even the past. Wounds that closed in another decade come undone, because whatever it is in fresh food that knits a man together, and no one aboard knows what it is, no one on earth precisely knows. This crew has now been without it for 100 days, and the oldest repairs fail first. They call it many things. The scurvy is one of the words, but it is a loose word, a landsman's word. The men call it the sea rot, and they know its stations the way they know the watches. First, the weariness beyond weariness, a heaviness like wet sand in every limb, and John has that. Then the gums and the bruising, and John has those. Then the legs swell tight and shine, and old wounds wake, and teeth begin to sit loose in their sockets, tilting like fence posts in soft ground, and a man can push one over with his tongue. And at the end, and every old sailor has watched the end, comes a strange dying that arrives without drama. Men taken suddenly, at a rope, at the pump, in their hammocks, gone between one breath and the next, as if the body, having sold everything else, finally sells the fire itself. There is no surgeon's remedy. The surgeon aboard is a decent man with a chest of pastes and syrups and a fine set of saws, and against the sea rot he has nothing but opinions. He says it is the thick sea air. He says it is idleness of the blood, and prescribes work, which is a bitter joke on a ship. Some masters swear the cure is vinegar, and casks of vinegar are carried and doled out solemnly by the spoonful, and it does nothing. Some swear by scrubbing the men with sand. What actually cures it, and every old sailor has seen this too without ever once understanding it, is the land. Men carried ashore dying, too weak to stand, gums black, legs like bladders, are fed on fresh greens and oranges, and new meat by some port hospital or some farm wife, and in 2 weeks they walk. In a month they are hauling ropes again. The old men have watched this resurrection over and over, and they have drawn from it the only conclusion their world allows them, which is that the land itself heals, the touch of it, the air of it, and so the sea rot is spoken of in the dark of the gun deck, almost as a homesickness of the flesh, the body pining to death for the shore. They are wrong about the mechanism and right about everything that matters. It is not the land. It is a molecule, hiding in the green living things of the land, a molecule so fragile that the salting kills it, the drying kills it, the boiling kills it, months in a cask kill it, so that the ship's entire mountain of food, tons and tons of it, every barrel, every board of fish, every stone of biscuit, contains not one useful trace of it. The ship is a machine for removing a single invisible nutrient from the diet of 160 men, and no one will name the nutrient for nearly 400 years, and in the meantime the sea rot will kill more sailors than storms, wrecks, and every navy's guns combined. Not by hundreds. Across these centuries of sail, by the hundreds of thousands. It is quietly one of the great slaughters of human history, and it is happening tonight invisibly in the blood of the man who shares your mess, who taught you the trick of soaking stockfish, who sleeps 10 feet from you, breathing that sweetish breath into the dark. You lie in your hammock swinging 14 inches from Perkin, listening to John not sleeping below you, and you run your tongue carefully around your own gums, the way every man on this ship now secretly does, several times a day, reading his own mouth like a letter from home. Yours are still firm. There is one place low on the left that is perhaps softer than it was, perhaps tender when you press it, or perhaps you have pressed it so many times that you've made it tender. And this is the special madness of the middle of a long voyage. Every man aboard, all 160, privately in the dark, tonguing his gums, counting his bruises, pressing his shins to see if the dent stays, doing sums about his own blood that he has no idea how to do. The ship sails on, the watches turn, and then, on a grey forenoon with the wind fresh from the southwest, the lookout at the maintop, a boy with the best eyes in the ship, leans out over the swaying void and screams the word that stops every heart aboard, and it is not the French. It is worse. He screams, "Weather." You have seen weather. You have been 3 months in the Channel, which is a body of water that manufactures weather the way Kent manufactures apples. You have been wet through for days on end. You have hauled canvas in rain that came sideways. You have been seasick in the first weeks, until you brought up bile, and then brought up nothing, and hung over a gun with your ribs aching, and the old men stepped over you without comment because everyone does it and everyone stops. You've not seen this. It stands on the southern horizon like a country, a wall of cloud the colour of a fresh bruise, purple-black at the base, its top blown forward into an anvil, and beneath it the sea has gone a strange, sick, luminous green, and the wind that arrives ahead of it, an hour ahead, is warm, which Aldous says, spitting over the side, is the worst sign there is. What happens next happens fast, and it happens to the food first, and this is why I am telling you about this storm at all, because you could hear about the drama of it anywhere. The wind, the seas, the fear. What you will not hear anywhere is that a storm on a Tudor warship is, before anything else, a catastrophe of housekeeping, and the housekeeping is life and death. The order comes to strike down and secure, and the ship becomes a nest of furious ants. Everything that can move will move when the sea gets up, and a moving object on a rolling ship is a weapon. A loose cask is a battering ram, a loose gun, and this is every sailor's private nightmare. A loose gun is a 2-ton animal charging about a crowded wooden room in the dark. So you are sent down, you and Walter and a dozen others, into the hold with lanterns to double-check the stowage of the ground tier, and this is your first time truly down among the barrels. And I want you to look around, because you are standing inside the ship's stomach. It is black beyond the lanterns, and the air is so thick, bilge and brine and old wood and rat, that it presses on your face like a damp cloth. The barrels go away into the dark in rows, tier on tier, each one wedged and chocked against its neighbours, and the whole mass groans continuously, wood against wood, as the ship works, a deep chorus of creaks below the waterline that you feel in your teeth. You crawl along the tiers checking wedges, driving in new ones with a maul, your knuckles skinning on oak, lantern lights swinging, rats pouring away from it along the tops of the casks in a grey ripple, and Walter, ahead of you, lays his huge hand flat on cask after cask like a man gentling horses, and the sea, on the other side of a single skin of planking inches from your shoulder, hisses past with a sound like tearing cloth. Then the storm arrives, and the world ends for 2 days. You cannot cook in a storm. Understand what that means. The one fire, the brick hearth down on the ballast, is doused at the first heavy weather, doused utterly, the coals drowned and raked, because a scattered fire in a rolling wooden ship is death for every soul aboard. No exceptions, no chances taken. The fire dies before the first big sea comes aboard, and with the fire dies hot food, hot anything, for as long as the storm cares to last. So for 2 days, the 160 men working this ship at the edge of their lives are fed thus: cold biscuit, cold cheese rind, and raw salt fish, gnawed straight, like dogs, in snatched minutes, wedged into corners, while the ship stands on its head. That is the ration of a crisis. Stone bread and raw preserved cod, eaten with hands numb past feeling, in clothes that have been soaked through for 30 hours, by men who cannot remember what sleep is. And you work. God, how you work. The pumps go continuously now. Watch and watch, because the ship is straining and taking water at every seam, and you pump in the dark with the deck heaving under you like a live thing trying to throw you. 100 strokes spelled 100 more. The handle bucking, the water sluicing across the deck and over your feet, and your hands, your poor ruined hands, have gone somewhere beyond pain. They are simply tools now, hooks of meat that you watch gripping things. On deck, seas come over the waist in solid green masses that knock men flat and wash them into the scuppers, and there are lifelines rigged fore and aft, and you learn the storm rhythm that every sailor of every century has learned. Move in the pauses, hold through the blows, one hand for yourself, always, always, one hand for yourself. In the middle of the second night, a beer cask breaks loose on the orlop. You hear it before you see it. Everyone does. A boom, boom, boom out of rhythm with the sea, and then the cry. And you go down with 6 others and a lantern into a low dark space, where a full hogshead, 500 pounds of oaken dead beer, is charging. It is exactly as bad as the old men's stories. The cask rolls with the ship, gathering way across the deck and killing itself against the far side. Boom! Staves cracking, and then rolls back through its own spilled beer, and the deck is awash and reeking, and the lantern shows you all of it in swinging slices. The black mass coming. Men scattering up onto the riders. Walter timing it. My God. Walter stepping in behind it as it passes with a coil of rope and getting a bite around one chin, and then all of you on the rope, hauling the thing's head round as if it were a bull, dragging it into the wedge of the deck angle, smothering it with bodies and mauls and chocks, and when it is done, when it is lashed dead, you all sit in the beer, in the dark, chests heaving, and someone, it is Perkin, of course it is Perkin, starts to laugh, and then all of you are laughing, howling, in the reeking dark on your backs in spilled beer with the storm trying to kill you overhead, laughing like the mad, because you are 22 and you are still alive and the cask is dead and the beer, the last of the good beer, is soaking gloriously up your trousers. Aldous later, when he hears it was Walter who roped it, he'll do. From Aldous, that is a knighthood. The storm blows itself out on the 3rd morning, the way they do, ashamed of itself, the sea subsiding into a long grey heave, the sun standing up pale and astonished, and the ship, when you finally look at her by daylight, is a wreck of the ship you knew. Rigging blown out, a yard sprung, everything soaked, everything salted, men moving about her decks like the risen dead, and the cook relights his fire down in the brick, coaxing it with cursing and dry tow saved for exactly this, and by noon there is smoke at the galley chimney, and the smell of boiling salt beef crawls aft along the ship, that same complicated, cruel smell as always, and I promise you that no one in any palace in Europe has ever anticipated any banquet the way 160 half-drowned men anticipate that grey-boiled leather. When your kid comes aft, steaming, and the mess closes around it between the guns in dryish clothes in sunlight slanting through the port, and you cut the first corner and the salt hits your cracked lips, and the hot fat runs down into your beard, Davy, 16 years old, eyes closed, chewing, says quietly, to no one, to God perhaps, "This is the best food ever made in the world." And here is the thing. In that moment, in the whole factual universe, he is not wrong. The reckoning of the storm comes in over the next days, the way it always does, in a list. A man lost overboard in the first night watch, gone between one sea and the next, a Cornishman, quiet, kept to himself, and his few things are auctioned at the mast for his family, and men who never spoke to him bid a week's pay for his spare shirt, because that is how a crew mourns. The man with the broken ankle from the watering, whose ankle was mending, thrown across the surgeon's space by a roll mending undone, and down in the hold, when the tiers are inspected, casks stove, casks shifted, brine leaked out of the meat cask so that the topmost meat sits half dry in its own salt crust, and seawater got into biscuit, sacks of it. Whole days of the ship's bread turned to swelling grey paste, and the purser goes about his inventory with his face getting longer, and the master reads the totals and looks at the sky and turns the ship for home waters. Not home, home waters. Because the summer is ripening now toward its violence, and the fleet is gathering at Portsmouth, every ship the king owns and every ship he can hire, and the Mary Grace is wanted in the line. But home waters means, first, before the battle, one thing that lights the ship from stem to stern, one word passed down the decks like fire, revictualling. Fresh stores, and where there is revictualling, there is, for some, a run ashore. The last week of the inbound passage is the hungriest of the voyage. This is the arithmetic arriving at its final answer. The beer is finished, truly finished, and the ship is on the green water, nose pinched, gulped, endured. The biscuit that survived the storm is issued at short weight, and men break it and count the shards. The last meat casks are the oldest in the ship, bottom-tier casks with the pitch worn off the hoops, packed, Aldous judges from the mark, more than 2 years ago for a voyage that never sailed, and when the cook broaches them the smell backs even Gilbert off a step, and the meat that comes out is the colour of mahogany and hard as it, rank, ancient, and it is soaked and boiled and issued and eaten. Eaten slowly, eaten with grimness, eaten with beerless water, but eaten every scrap, and the broth drunk, and the fat skimmed and spread on biscuit, and Perkin, gnawing his ration down to a shine, holds up the bone-hard heel of his piece and says, "Remember, I told you about the rats going for a shilling." And nobody laughs. That is the difference a week makes. Nobody laughs. And 2 nights later you hear, forward, in the dark near the manger, the unmistakable sound of a rat trap of someone's private manufacture going off, and the unmistakable sound of a man being pleased about it, and you turn over in your hammock and you do not judge him, because your own stomach, hearing it, remarked, clearly and shamelessly in its own low voice, "Meat." And then, on a bright forenoon, the Isle of Wight lifts out of the sea. You have to be a sailor at the end of a long commission to know what land looks like. It looks like a colour you had forgotten existed. The island stands up out of the Channel haze green, impossibly, wetly, extravagantly green, green like a shout, and the smell comes off it on the wind miles out. Grass and dung and hay and smoke, the smell of everything alive, and men come up from below who have no duty on deck, dozens of them, and stand at the rail in silence, just breathing it, breathing the land, and you look along the rail at the row of grey, bruised, gap-toothed faces, all turned the same way with the wind moving in their beards, and Crooked John is there too, helped up the ladder by Davy, John who can barely walk now, whose legs have swollen so tight his skin shines, and John breathes the land air in long, slow pulls, deliberately, like a man drinking, because he believes, they all believe, that the land air itself is medicine. And within a fortnight of getting him ashore, into a Portsmouth lodging where a widow feeds him spring greens, salad herbs, fresh milk, scurvy grass, which grows wild on the salt marshes, and which the old sailors' wives gather because everyone knows, without knowing why, that it mends sailors. Within a fortnight John's gums will pale, his legs will fall, his 15-year-old scar will quietly close itself again, and he will walk back up a gangplank under his own power. You will see it with your own eyes and understand none of it, and file it where the old men file it, under the mercy of the shore. Portsmouth, when you round into the great harbour, stops your breath. You left it a working port. You return to find the greatest concentration of naval force England has ever assembled. The anchorage is a forest, a floating city, ships beyond counting from where you stand, the huge ones towering like cathedrals, the Henry Grace herself somewhere in the press, 1,000 tons of her, and among them, boats, hundreds of boats, crawling the water like beetles, and every boat is carrying the same cargo, and the cargo is food. Because this is the other half of the story I've been telling you all night, the half the sailors themselves rarely saw, the shore machine. An army marches on its stomach, the saying goes, but a fleet floats on a mountain of barrels, and someone has to build the mountain. All this spring and summer, while you are at sea gnawing leather, the whole south of England has been turned into a food engine. The king's officers have swept the counties buying, and where buying was slow, taking, oxen by the herd driven roaring into Portsmouth, pigs, flour by the 100-ton, the mills grinding, the great brewhouses the king ordered built at Portsmouth running day and night, and still not enough, never enough. Brewers as far as London under contract, beer casks lighted down the Thames, round the coast, bakehouses turning out biscuit by the ton, ovens never cold, slaughterhouses running at a pace that turns the harbour water red on killing days, and the salters and packers standing in brine to the elbow, 12 hours at a stretch, hands pickled, whitened, split, packing beef into casks, layer of meat, layer of salt, layer of meat, faster, faster, because 30,000 French are coming and the fleet eats. At anchor doing nothing at all, the fleet eats every single day the food of a large town, and the coopers. Spare a thought at the edge of sleep for the coopers of 1545, because this entire war, this entire age of the sea, stands on a craft. Every drop of drink, every pound of flesh, every crumb of bread that keeps every fleet of every nation alive lives in a cask, and a cask is 30-odd staves of split oak, persuaded into a curve and bound in hoops by a man's eye and hand. No glue, no nails in the joints, nothing but geometry and skill holding water out and beer in, and Portsmouth this summer rings with them. The copperages going like drums, thousands upon thousands of casks, and when the beer sours in a week because the coopers were rushed and the wood was green, as it does, as it famously, disastrously does this very summer, with beer coming back condemned by the shipload, and the brewers and the coopers and the victuallers all blaming one another while the fleet goes thirsty. The King's Council writes letters about it in tones of cold fury, because everyone from the king down understands the truth you have lived all voyage. The fleet is not powered by sail. It is powered by beer, bread, and salt meat. And if the casks fail, England fails. Your ship warps in among all this, and is swallowed by it. And for 6 days the Mary Grace is not a warship, but a warehouse door. Hoy after hoy comes alongside, and the yardarm tackles swing, and casks rise up the side in slings, endlessly. Beef, pork, biscuit in bags and casks, beer, beer, beer above all, and you labour in the hold, restowing the tiers, building the mountain fresh, and it is brutal work and nobody minds. Nobody, because every cask that thuds down onto the ballast is a day of life, and because the new biscuit, listen, a bag splits at the hoisting, and biscuits skitter across the deck and you take one. Warm, I swear to you, still faintly warm from a Portsmouth oven, and you break it in your hands and it breaks, it yields to hands alone, and inside it is pale and dense and clean and smells of wheat and nothing else at all. And you and Davy and Walter stand there in the organised chaos of the deck eating fresh biscuit in silence, and it tastes of harvest fields. It tastes like the colour gold, and Walter, who has said perhaps 40 words all commission, looks at his and says quietly, "I'd forgot. You get one run ashore, one evening, and I could tell you about the alehouse, and the crush of sailors from 40 ships, and the noise. But the part of that evening that belongs to this story, the part you will remember on your deathbed, costs a penny. A woman at a stall by the point is selling cherries, the first cherries of the summer, out of a rush basket, and you give her a penny and she pours a measure into your cupped hands, and you stand there in the street with your hat off and eat cherries, and the first one bursts against the roof of your mouth, cold, sweet, sharp, juicy, alive, so shockingly alive after 4 months of salt and stone that your eyes water. They actually water. You stand in a Portsmouth street with your hands full of cherries, crying quietly without shame, and the woman looks at you and does not laugh. She has sold cherries to returning sailors before. She says gently, "There's more, lad. Eat slow. You will taste those cherries when you are 80 in your chair by someone's fire. Some meals never end, and then the French come. It is July now. The fleet lies at Spithead, that great sheet of anchorage between Portsmouth and the island, and the king himself is here, Henry, huge and glittering, dining aboard the flagship, and on the 18th day of July the horizon to the east fills with sails, and keeps filling, and keeps filling, and the number that comes down from the tops is a number nobody wants to say twice. 200 and more. The largest fleet that has ever threatened this island, greater than the armada that will come in your grandchildren's time, and it has come to burn Portsmouth and land an army, and between it and England lies your anchored fleet, and you. I am not going to give you the battle tonight, not all of it, because this is a story about barrels, and the honest, strange truth is that even now, even in the days of battle, your life remains a life of food and water. The guns fire on the second day, the French galleys creeping in a flat calm to gall the anchored English, the shore forts answering, thunder rolling around the Solent for hours, and you serve your demi-culverin stripped to the waist in the smoke. sponging, ramming, running out, death by mid-morning. Your world narrowed to the gun, and Walter's mouth making shapes. And between the firings, boys come along the deck with skins of beer, the new beer, and you drink with powder-black hands, gasping, and someone brings biscuit round at midday and you eat it crouched at the gun, actually laughing at something perk in mouths that you cannot hear, and the ship fights and eats, because a ship is never anything else but men being kept alive to work. And it is on the evening of the second day, the 19th of July, a Sunday in light airs, with the whole English fleet getting under way to close the enemy, that you see half a mile off, a thing that no man who saw it ever stopped seeing. The Mary Rose, the great ship, the King's darling, 500 tons of her, 35 years in his service, freshly refitted, packed with soldiers and gunners, her ports open and her guns run out, heels to a gust as she comes about, heels further, and does not come back. You see her open gun ports, the ports you have looked at 1,000 times on your own ship, an arm's length above her waterline, tip toward the sea, and the sea, patient, waiting, eternal, walks in through them. She goes over and down in minutes, in full view of the king on the shore, of the fleet, of you at your gun with a rammer in your hand and your mouth open. Her fighting tops stand out of the water where she settles, and around them a stain of men, hundreds of men, and the netting, the anti-boarding netting stretched over her open waist to keep the French out, keeps her own men in, and of the several hundred souls aboard her, fewer than 40 come out of the water alive. The boats go, every boat in the fleet goes, yours goes, you pull an oar toward the top standing out of the sea, and there is almost no one left to save. That night the fleet lies to its anchors in a silence you can lean on. The French will withdraw in the coming days, baffled, skirmish and go, the invasion failing not by one great battle, but by fever in their crowded ships, thirst, spoiled stores, the same barrel arithmetic that governs you, and the summer will be remembered, when it is remembered at all, for the great ship lost to a gust and an open port, in sight of home, with her dinner in her hold. And on your own gun deck that Sunday night your mess eats its supper. Fresh biscuit, new beer, cheese with no travel in it yet. Nobody says very much. Davy is somewhere forward, by the manger, sitting with the pig. And Aldous at last breaks the biscuit in his hands in the lantern light, and looks at it, clean and pale and yielding, and says the truest sentence anyone will say in England that year. He says, "The sea takes some quick and some slow, and it feeds you while it decides." Then he dunks his biscuit in his beer because his gums hurt, because they have hurt for 30 years, and he eats his supper, and so do you. The fleet does not disperse when the French go. The war is not over. Only the crisis, and the Mary Grace is ordered out again in August with a squadron to harry the French coast, and so the wheel turns once more, and you go round with it, and this second, shorter commission is where you stop being a new man and become, without any ceremony, without noticing the day it happens, a sailor. You can mark the change in small things if you look. You no longer count your biscuit shards. You no longer read your gums every hour, only every few days, the way Aldous does. A professional glance. You have opinions about casks now. You can lay your palm on a beer cask as it comes out of the sling and tell the master's mate, from the temperature and the weep of it, that this one wants drinking first, and be right. Your hands have finished becoming their final selves, and they will stay this way for the rest of your life. Wide, yellow-horned, seamed with tar, hands that farm women will glance at in church for the next 40 years and know at once what you were. You eat in the dark by choice now, even at anchor, even when there is light to be had, because you have learned that a man who inspects his food at sea is spending strength he will want later, and strength, you understand now, is the only true coin aboard, hoarded, spent, lent, and stolen like any other money. And you have learned the deepest lesson of the ship's food, the one that no one teaches in words, the one you absorbed the way you absorb the smell, that eating at sea is not about pleasure, and it is not even, first, about hunger. It is about tomorrow. Every meal is a wager placed on the next day's labour. The salt beef you force down tonight is the strength in your arms when the squall hits at 4 a.m. The rancid butter you spread thick is the warmth that keeps your body's fire lit through a night watch in October drizzle. Men aboard do not say I am hungry. They say, looking at foul beer or ancient pork, it will carry me to Thursday, and they drink it down, and it does mostly carry them to Thursday. The whole ship lives one meal ahead of its own collapse always, and knows it, and jokes about it, and hauls anyway. There is a courage in that which has never had a monument built to it. The courage of the swallow, the daily unwitnessed bravery of 160 throats getting the necessary evil down, and I would put it against any charge on any battlefield in history. There is a food of the night watches too that belongs to no ration book, and you learn it this autumn, and it may be the thing you miss most, later, of the whole life. In the middle watch, in the dead cold hours, the men on deck who are not at the helm or the lookout gather in the lee of the mainmast, hunched, and someone produces the watch's hoard. A saved heel of biscuit, a scrape of butter in a wooden box, once, gloriously, a hot stone. I mean an actual stone, smooth, the size of 2 fists, that one of the older men smuggles down to Gilbert's fire in the evening and carries up wrapped in sacking at midnight, and it goes round the huddle, hand to hand, each man holding it against his belly for a count of 100, while the biscuit goes round the other way, and the sea hisses past in the dark, and the rigging hums its one long note overhead, and somebody tells in a low voice, because voices carry strangely at night at sea, the same stories that watches have told since men first floated, ports they have seen, storms they have outlived, meals above all meals, remembered meals, invented meals, the goose someone's uncle roasted one Christmas in the year 12, described basted inch by golden inch, while 11 mouths water in the darkness. Talking about food in the cold at 2 a.m. with a warm stone going round. Men in that huddle are hungry, tired, wet, salted, owed money, far from everyone they love. And I have to report to you truthfully across the centuries that they are also, unmistakably in some way that shames every soft definition of the word, happy. The autumn patrol gives you one more story to carry, and it is a small one, and I am giving it to you precisely because it is small, because the small ones are the true shape of that life. It is late September, blowing hard from the west, cold now, the first real cold of the year, and the ship has been on short commons for a week because the squadron stayed out longer than its stores were laid for, the way squadrons always do. And supper this night is biscuit and cheese, and the cheese ration is down to half a fist per man. And Davy is not eating his. He is sitting with it in his hand, in the mess circle between the guns, in the swinging light, and he is looking at it. And his face is doing something complicated, and the mess pretends for a while not to see, because a mess is a family and families know when to be blind. But Aldous at last says quietly, "What?" And Davy says, "They killed Mercy today. The pig, his pig, the last pig, gone to the coppers for the sick bay broth and the officers' table, as pigs on ships always go, as everyone always knew she would go, as Davy himself always knew, being a farm boy, being nobody's fool. And still, he sat with her most evenings for 5 months. She knew his step, he says. She knew his step on the ladder. And nobody laughs. I want that understood across 5 centuries. Not one man laughs. Walter, who has watched men die at the guns without a word, puts his half-fist of cheese on Davy's knee and looks away, daring the world to remark on it. Perkin, for once in his God-given life, says nothing at all, and Crooked John, who is back aboard, mended, walking, alive, because widows and salt-marsh weeds are wiser than surgeons, John says, in the dark, gruff, final, like a man closing a ledger, she was a good pig. And that, on a king's warship in time of war, is a funeral, and it is enough. And Davy eats his supper, and Walter's cheese too, because grief at sea is real, but supper is realer. And the wind hums in the shrouds overhead, all night like something enormous being patient. By the time the ship pays off at Portsmouth in the falling weather of late autumn, you've been 7 months a sailor, and the Crown owes you above 40 shillings and pays you most of it, which by the standards of the age is a miracle of administration, and you walk down the gangplank with your canvas bag on your shoulder, the same bag, the same knife, the same spoon, and the cheese rag, which you never threw away, and your legs, on the solid stone of the quay, betray you. The ground heaving under you that first hour ashore, the way the deck heaved, so that you stagger like a drunk at 10 in the morning, and the porters grin, because every returning sailor staggers, because the body learns the sea so deeply it forgets how to believe in land. And here is what you do with your first free hour and your first free shilling, and every man off that ship does some version of the same. You do not go to the alehouse. You go to the market. You walk into the crowded, roaring, reeking, glorious food market of a Tudor port town, past the fish stalls, past the butchers with fresh-killed mutton hanging red and marbled, past the bakers, and the smell of new bread hits you like a wave. Real bread, soft bread, tonight's bread, and you buy. A small loaf, still hot, a knob of sweet butter wrapped in a cabbage leaf, a handful of late plums, and a mug of milk. Milk from a woman with a pail, and you carry it all to a mounting block by the church wall, and you sit, and you eat the plainest meal in England. And it undoes you. The bread gives under your fingers like a living thing. The butter is sweet, sweet, with no salt and no journey in it, and it melts into the hot crumb, and the milk is cool and fat and mild, and the plum, when you bite it, floods your mouth with juice that runs down your chin, and you sit there on a stone by a church in Portsmouth, 22 years old, weathered like a man of 40, with tar in your palms and a dead man's shirt in your bag, eating bread and butter with tears running openly down your face, and passers-by step around you without staring, because this is a navy town and they have seen this exact sight 1,000 times, a paid-off sailor being ambushed by fresh food, and they know it for what it is, which is not weakness. It is a man's body thanking him for bringing it home. You will go back to sea. That is the joke and the tragedy and the truth of it, and you already know it, sitting on the stone. They almost all go back. The farm has no place for you. The wage is real. The mess was a family, and something out there, something in the size of the mornings and the company of men who have held a rope with you in the dark, has got into your blood alongside the salt, and by spring you will be standing on this same quay looking up at another towering side, another row of gun ports, another hold already filling, somewhere below the waterline with barrels. But that is spring. That is another voyage and other stories, and they are not tonight's. Tonight, let the year turn without you for a while. Stay ashore, here, in the lodging you have taken in a lane behind the point, in the house of the same widow who mended Crooked John, who takes in sailors because her husband was one and did not come home, and who has looked at your grey face and your gapped gums and has decided without announcing it to mend you too. The winter goes like this, and I will give it to you slowly now, because we are nearly at the harbour of this whole long night, and it is time to shorten sail. You sleep the first fortnight, like something recovering from a wound. 10 hours, 12. Waking confused at the stillness because your body keeps listening for the bell, for the watch call, for the groan of the hull, and hears only rain on thatch, and a cart in the lane, and the widow raking her fire below, and it takes weeks, honest weeks, before you stop surfacing at midnight and 4 o'clock out of pure habit, braced to turn out and learn again the enormous forgotten luxury of rolling over. You eat what she gives you, and what she gives you is nothing and everything. Pottage thick with winter greens and barley, herring fresh from the boats, eggs, cheese that is simply cheese, bread that is simply bread, small beer that tastes of malt and not of the barrel's despair, and under this plain tide of ordinary food your body quietly rebuilds itself, the way bodies do without being asked. The soft place in your gum firms. The bone-deep ache in your hands eases to a weather ache, which you will keep, a barometer in your knuckles until you die. The grey leaves your face. You catch yourself one December morning, taking the stairs 2 at a time, and stop, halfway, surprised, listening to your own body like a man hearing an old tune, because there is strength in it that arrived without labour, strength that came, though you will never know this, riding on cabbage leaves and herring, and the vitamin no one will name for 400 years, and in the evenings, by the widow's fire, with the rain walking on the roof and the harbour wind worrying the shutters, you find that you have become a teller of it. The neighbours come, as neighbours do, and the boy from the bakehouse who dreams of the sea sits on the floor with his arms round his knees, and they ask, and you tell them, about the biscuit you knock on the gun, about Gilbert one-legged in his horseshoe of brick, about the storm and Walter and the charging cask, about the green wall of the island rising from the sea, about the great ship going over with her ports open, 1/2 mile off, in a Sunday evening light. And you notice what every sailor before you and after you has noticed, that the telling sorts itself, that the misery goes quiet and the wonder comes forward, that already, months out, the taste of the foul water is fading and the taste of the cherries is getting stronger, and you understand that this is how the sea keeps manning her ships. Generation upon generation, she lets the bodies forget. The boy from the bakehouse asks you, one night, the question, was it worth it? And you look into the fire for a while, and you think of the sum of it. The ruined hands, the man from Cornwall, the sweet horror of the cheese, the pig, the cherries, Aldous breaking clean biscuit in the lantern light, and you give the boy the only honest answer there has ever been, which is, I'm going back. And the fire cracks, and the rain goes on, and that is nearly the end, but not quite, because you deserve, after this long night, the long slow going down, and here it is. Because before we let Thomas sleep, I want to pull the camera back just once gently and show you the size of the thing you've been living inside all night. You've spent one voyage in one ship in one summer. Now widen it. Widen it across the whole of that fleet at Spithead. 10,000 men and more, every one of them fed from the same mountain of casks, every one of them knocking weevils out of biscuit in the dark, running his tongue around his gums, doing the private arithmetic. Widen it across the century. These ships that will go out under Elizabeth farther, so much farther, around the whole turning world, and the diet goes with them, the beef, the biscuit, the beer, unchanged in anything that matters, and on the long ocean crossings the sea rot comes aboard like a passenger who was always going to come. And there are voyages in the age of exploration, real ones, recorded ones, where a ship leaves with 200 men and comes home with 60. And the 60 are not the strong ones or the brave ones. They are the lucky ones, and some of them are the ones whose private stores, a bag of onions, a jar of preserved fruit bought on a whim in a foreign port, happened by pure blind chance to contain the invisible thing. Widen it further. 200 years after Thomas, a Scottish naval surgeon named James Lind will take 12 scorbutic sailors on a ship called the Salisbury, divide them into pairs, and feed each pair a different supposed remedy: cider, vinegar, seawater, a paste, an elixir, and 2 oranges and a lemon a day, and the 2 men on the citrus will be back on their feet in less than a week, and it will be one of the first controlled clinical trials in the history of medicine, conducted in a swinging sick bay off the coast of France. And here is the part that should keep historians humble forever. Almost nothing will happen. The finding will sit disputed, diluted, half ignored for another 40 years and more, while sailors go on dying by the tens of thousands, because institutions are slower than ships, and it is not until the very end of the 1700s that the Royal Navy at last issues lemon juice as a daily ration, and the sea rot, the great slow devourer, the thing that killed more seamen than every enemy fleet in history combined, simply stops like a tide going out. And British sailors are called limeys forever after, a mockery made out of a miracle. And the biscuit, Thomas's biscuit, the stone bread, sails on and on longer than anyone would believe, into the age of steam, into tins, into the ration packs of wars your great-grandparents remember, hardtack, and soldiers in the trenches of the 20th century will crack their teeth on it and curse it in the same words, more or less, that Aldous used. And there is a biscuit, a single ship's biscuit, that survives to this day in a museum in England, baked before Trafalgar, over 200 years old, and it is fine. It is perfectly fine. It would still break your teeth. It has outlived the ship, the crew, the war, the empire, and it will outlive the museum. That is what Thomas held in his hand in the dark that first night we met him. He was eating something engineered to defeat time itself, because time was the enemy, time and water and rot the true enemies, always, the French, merely the loudest one. And the Mary Rose, the great ship you watched go down in the Sunday light, she has one more thing to tell you, and it is the reason we can sit here tonight, 5 centuries away, and know any of this at all, know it down to the weevil and the plumstone. Because she settled into the soft mud of the Solent, and the mud closed over her lower hull, and sealed it, and held it, dark and airless, for 437 years, and when they raised her, within living memory, gently in a cradle, on a grey October morning with the whole world watching, they found inside her the ordinary day she died in the middle of. The casks were still in her hold. The bones of the beef were still in the casks. Plumstones, peppercorns, fish bones from the last stockfish. The cook's cauldron sitting in its brick furnace, the great copper still there, and the surgeon's chest with its ointment still in the jars, and wooden bowls with men's marks scratched in the rims, and combs with lice still in the teeth, and the longbows and the shoes and the men. Everything I've told you tonight about the food of that world, the daily, chewing, swallowing, uncelebrated truth of it, we know not mainly from chronicles which recorded kings, but from the mud which recorded dinner. History wrote down the battle, the seabed wrote down the menu. And of the two, I will tell you a secret. The menu tells you more about what it was to be alive. There is one more piece of the ship's food world I've not given you yet, and it belongs here, in the middle of the second commission, because it took you months to even see it. And it is this. Aboard a Tudor warship, alongside the king's official river of beef and beer and biscuit, there flows a second economy, a private one, quiet, universal, and it is the true map of the crew's soul. Every man who has ever been to sea before comes aboard with a private store. It is never large. It cannot be. There is nowhere to keep anything, but it is sacred. A small bag of onions hung from a beam by a man's hammock, guarded like relics, because an onion, raw, sharp, juicy, is the single most craved article on the ship by month 3, and men will pay astonishing prices for 1, a day's wage 2. And here is the strange thing that no one aboard can explain. The onion men, the men who eat an onion a week from their own store, are, noticeably, reliably, the men whose gums stay pink longest. The old sailors know this the way they know weather signs, as pure pattern without cause, and they hang their onions and say nothing, and the pattern is, of course, the invisible molecule again, hiding in the onion, saving lives at a shilling apiece in the dark of the gun deck 300 years before anyone will know why. Aldous keeps garlic, strings of it, and a jar of honey wrapped in sacking honey for his gums, he says, rubbed in with a finger, and whether it does anything at all no one knows. But Aldous has outlived 4 ships. Walter keeps a box of dried plums, prunes, and eats exactly 1 every Sunday. 1, with a ritual slowness that is almost frightening, and will neither sell nor share nor explain them. Perkin keeps nothing, because Perkin eats his store in the first week of every voyage he has ever sailed, and everyone knows it, and every voyage he swears this time will be different, and it never is. And by month 2 he is trading, because that is the other half of the private economy, the market. The mess deck is a market every day, quiet, constant, conducted in murmurs. Cheese trades for beer, beer trades for tobacco, which men are beginning to bring aboard now, the strange new smoke from the west. A man who cannot chew his beef, because his teeth are going, trades it to a man with a young jaw for softer stuff. Biscuit, crumb and butter, and no one calls it charity. It is trade, honest trade, and the price is fair. And in this way the mess quietly reorganises the king's ration around each man's ruin. There are men who lend food at interest, a shilling's cheese now for a shilling and 3pence at payoff, and they are watched carefully and used anyway. There are men who will do your watch at the pump for your fish ration, men who mend clothes for butter, a whole submerged system of exchange, and when you finally see it, all of it, working away under the official life of the ship, you understand something true about human beings that you will keep forever. Put 160 of them in a wooden box with not quite enough of anything, and within a month they will have built, out of nothing, out of biscuit and thread and favours, a complete civilization. And you understand too why the punishments for stealing food are what they are, because they are terrible. A man caught stealing from a shipmate's store, and it happens once, this commission, a Portsmouth man caught in the night with his hand in another man's onion bag, is not flogged by the officers. That is the point. The officers barely need to be involved. The crew handles it, with the master's blind eye turned in the old way. He runs the gauntlet of his own shipmates between the guns, and afterward no man of any mess will eat beside him, not one for the rest of the voyage, and he takes his meals alone by the manger with the smell of the pigs, and on a crowded ship, solitude is the deepest hole there is. Because theft of food at sea is not theft of property. Everyone aboard understands this in their bones. It is theft of days. You're not stealing an onion. You're stealing the Thursday it would have carried a man to. The sick, meanwhile, eat by a different law, and it is a gentler one than you expected. The ship carries, on paper, and mostly in fact, a sick diet. Oatmeal for gruel, some sugar, prunes, rice, the fresh eggs while the hens last, and the pig broth. Mercy's broth. God rest her. And when a man goes onto the surgeon's list, his mess carries his gruel to him themselves, and sits with him in the reeking dark of the orlop while he drinks it, and coaxes him spoon by spoon like mothers, these tarred, scarred, gap-toothed men, because everyone knows that a sick man who stops eating has let go of the rope, and the mess will not let one of its own let go of the rope, and more men are pulled back from the edge on that ship by stubborn spoon-feeding shipmates than by anything in the surgeon's chest. And that too deserves its monument and has none and never will, except nights like this one when somebody tells it. So, come back down now. Come back to the small room behind Portsmouth Point, the widow's house, the winter of 1545 turning to 1546, and Thomas Wick 22, asleep adjacent, which is where we want him, and where I suspect some of you are too. The fire in the room below has burned down to a settled orange murmur. You can hear it through the floorboards, the occasional soft collapse of an ember, a sound like the house sighing in its sleep. The rain has eased to that fine, patient sea-town drizzle that is less a weather than a texture, a faint continuous whisper on the thatch, on the shutters, on the lane's worn stones, on the dark harbour water, where 1,000 hulls lie nodding at their moorings in the dark. You're lying in an actual bed. After 7 months of a hammock 14 inches wide, this bed feels like a meadow. You can stretch both arms out and touch nothing but linen. The mattress is stuffed with wool and it holds the shape of you, warm, and the blankets have real weight, a gentle pressing down along your whole body, and your feet are warm, both of them at the same time, which at sea happened perhaps 4 times in 7 months, and never in winter. Your hands ache, quietly, the old ache, the weather ache, and you flex them slowly under the blanket, one finger at a time, the way all sailors do, and the ache is almost companionable now, almost an old shipmate, and it fades as the warmth gets into the joints. Your stomach is full. Barley pottage and bread and a baked apple the widow put in front of you without a word, because it is Sunday, and the apple was soft and sweet all through, with a spoonful of honey in its heart, and the taste of it is still faintly with you. Honey and warm fruit, the whole final answer to a year of salt, and your body lies in the warmth doing its quiet night work, mending, storing, building you back, asking nothing, and your mind does what minds do in the last light of the day. It drifts back over the water. You think of the ship laid up now for the winter, riding at her mooring in the dark rain, a half-mile from this bed, empty, cold, her holds swept clean, her guns struck down, her decks that held all that life holding nothing tonight but rain and the watchman's lantern. You think of the mess, scattered as messes always scatter. Walter gone home to a wife in Kent nobody knew he had. Perkin talking his way through the taverns of 3 counties. Davy back on his father's farm at Gosport for the winter, where there are pigs, and where, you'd wager everything you own, he's out in the frost right now, leaning on a rail, talking quietly to one. Crooked John mended and rebroken and mended, wintering somewhere with his ledger of a body. And Aldous who would not leave the sea for a winter or a kingdom. Aldous is shipkeeper aboard a vessel in the harbour, living alone in the dark hull with a brazier and a store of biscuit he chose himself, cask by cask, knocking it on the beams out of pure habit, and if you listen, in your half-sleep, you can almost hear it. Faint, across the water, through the rain. Knock, knock. Wait, knock. The sounds of the town settle around you, layer under layer, going down, the drizzle on the thatch, the fire's murmur, a dog streets away once, and then thinking better of it. The tide at the bottom of everything, the low endless breath of the harbour, in and out and in, the sound that was under every other sound of your whole year. The sea, still there, always there, patient, keeping. It will keep till spring. It is not going anywhere. Neither tonight are you. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a bed and a body that is mending itself in the dark without being asked, and 40 shillings in a box under the floorboard, and a spoon and a knife and a rag that once held cheese, and people down the lane and across the water who would put their half-fist of cheese on your knee if the year went hard. That is more than most. That is plenty. That is enough. The rain goes on, softer now, or you're just listening less. The border between waking and sleep begins to blur, the way it does when the body is truly done, when it has decided kindly and firmly that consciousness is no longer required. Somewhere out in the wet dark, the fleet sleeps at its moorings. The casks sleep in the cellars of the victualling yards, tier on tier, waiting for spring. The ovens of the bakehouses are banked and warm. The brewhouses tick as they cool. The whole vast patient machinery of feeding the sea lies quiet for a season, and the sea itself lies quiet, doing its slow, enormous breathing, in and out and in. Tomorrow there will be work. There is always work. Wood to split for the widow. A mast pond where they are hiring day labour. A spring commission to think about. Tomorrow there will be bread again, and the small beer, and the lane, and the gulls. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is just this. The weight of the blankets, the warmth of your own feet, the fire below sighing, the rain saying the one soft thing it says. You close your eyes, centuries will pass. The town outside this window will change beyond recognition. The lanes will be paved and lit and filled with machines Thomas could not dream of. The ships will turn to iron, then to steel, then will hardly need the wind or the men at all. The biscuit will become bread that never goes hard. The meat will keep fresh in boxes of cold. The water will run sweet from a metal mouth in every wall, and the sea rot will become a curiosity in old books, a strange word, scurvy, that children learn and forget. But people will still live by this harbour, still work, still worry, still come home tired in the rain, still sit down at the end of the day to eat and feel that ancient animal gratitude, older than ships, older than salt, the body saying thank you. We go on, and still lie down at night, full and warm and heavy, listening to the weather on the roof, wondering what tomorrow will bring, and letting the wondering go. Some things don't change. The tide doesn't change. The rain on a roof doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, the long slow letting go of it, that doesn't change either. so let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Wick in the widow's house by Portsmouth Harbour, 500 years ago, with the fleet dark on the water and the rain on the thatch. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest, all of it. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.